Hey everyone, Dave from BC Bushcraft, and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to do a really simple video on my ferro rod technique. I haven't been able to do a video for a little bit just from working and things like that, and I'm out here with my wife and dog doing a bit of hiking, and we're at this lake, so I decided to do a little bit of a video and show you guys just a really basic technique on how I use my ferro rod. The ferro rod that I literally have had this ferro rod since I started my channel. This is a 10 centimeter by 1 centimeter, so like 100 millimeters by 10 millimeter ferro rod, and I've been using this thing for the best part of 2 years, I believe, and it's done me really well. I've broken the handle once on it, so I've had to put a new handle on it, which I've done recently. You know, the ferro rod is a really fun way to make fire for sure in bushcraft. Obviously, you know, lighter and a match are often easier than using a ferro rod, but there's definitely something to learning how to use one of these, and it helps you develop your understanding of fire making and just gives you, you know, a better grip on bushcraft as a whole and as an activity. You should try to get your fire lighting past using a lighter and, you know, things like newspaper to get your fires going. So I'll give you a few tips on how I use my ferro rod, ways that I strike it using a knife and using some other things to strike it with. And we'll also go through some basic steps of how to light feather sticks too. All right, so first things first is I do like to have a longer ferro rod than, instead of having a shorter one. I find it a lot easier to strike a ferro rod that's longer, and also a ferro rod that has a handle on it, something to grab onto, makes it a lot less clunky and fumbly to be using. So I try to put on a handle that has a reasonable amount of wood to grab onto, and even though it's not as compact, it's definitely easier to use. I used to have, you know, just a little bit of tape, electrical tape on it, on this one in particular, when I had broken my handle, and I found it a lot harder to strike with that size. It's a lot easier to have a nice grip on that ferro rod if you have a decent handle on it. To get things going, I'll just shave some fat wood down and we'll try to strike with the ferro rod. So one of the main things when you're using a ferro rod, I always like to have a really solid, firm base and hold the ferro rod on that base and have it steady. Don't try to be striking it, lifting it up and striking into it like that. I don't find that technique as effective as having a firm base. What you want to do as well, especially if you're using the back of the knife, you want to be using the full length of your ferro rod to strike down onto the material that you want to light on fire. You don't want to just be using the end. It doesn't work as well. You want it full length, and you'll get some nicer sparks that way, and you can kind of come up and down the ferro rod, scrape off some of the shavings that will also ignite once you get that spark going. Firm base. And there you go. And fat wood is really easy to light on fire with a ferro rod. I find it probably the easiest natural resource pretty much to light on fire. A lot of you out there who know and use fat wood would probably say the same thing. So if you have fat wood in your area, I would suggest try to find it and collect it. You can purchase it online as well, but it's always better to find your own resources for fire lighting. So obviously you have to have a 90-degree spine on the back of your knife to be able to strike a ferro rod. One thing I should say is that I do find striking a ferro rod with a knife is a little more clunky and a little harder to control than if you used a simple small striker. So something like this hacksaw blade that's been broken off, and I use this for a really long time in conjunction with this ferro rod to light my fires. And it's just easier to control a small piece of metal that's sharpened than it is to control a bigger knife. You know, that's probably the simplest and easiest way to strike a ferro rod is with a striker of that size. A lot easier to control, way better than using a knife. And then, you know, a knife you do get more power. You can scrape a bit more maybe, but sometimes in tighter quarters it's just more awkward, more fumbly, and you're more likely to hit your material and blow it all over the place. black smoke right in my face. Put that off to the side. Help get the mosquitoes away. You could also use, I have this small Swiss Army knife that's more of it's not really that functional, it's really tiny. It's something that you would put on your keychain for your car keys or something like that. It's not much of an item that is really functional out in the woods, but the file on it has a square enough spine to actually strike a ferro rod. So you can also use pieces on your multi-tool that have sharpened spines, or like a piece of the knife on it. Just be careful that you're not going to close the blade on yourself, you know, common sense stuff. And things like this will also strike your ferro rod, maybe not as effectively as some of the other items, but you can still use things like that. Anything that has, you know, a square piece of metal that's sharp enough. And I think even things like glass, I haven't really tried it, but maybe certain rocks and stuff like that might be able to throw a spark. Right here we have the back of a pocket knife. So I find that the smaller the knife, the easier it is to strike a ferro rod properly. If you guys are fans of taking neck knives or smaller EDC blades that are fixed blades, instead of your big kind of 5-inch, you know, 4-inch blades, I do find that those ones are easier to strike ferro rods than your bigger blades, just because you have more control over a small blade. This is the knife that I made myself, and I find it's really nice in striking a ferro rod. It's probably one of my favorite knives to use in conjunction with this ferro rod. And if you guys have watched some of my other videos, you might have seen me light a fire by using my ferro rod with the back of my saw. I had brought out with me a Mora Classic #1 and forgot that I hadn't sharpened the back of the spine, and I didn't bring a striker with me, and you know, I had to kind of think on the spot and look for something that I could use to strike the ferro rod with, and I used the back of my saw. So, you know, things like this can work too. Anything that has a sharp piece of metal that you feel like will scrape on the ferro rod, it's going to work. So I quickly just made up a feather stick, and I find that when I'm lighting a feather stick, it's also good to have a firm ground. You can kind of lean it up against your chest sometimes you can't. You kind of just have to lie it on the ground and put your ferro rod and strike it in to the finest curls that you've made. Another way that I've found that you can do is you can rest your ferro rod just up from the curls, and you can wrap your finger around it and then hold it firm to your feather stick like that, like so. And then you can shoot into your curls. Oh, not quite. Something's going. And that way you get some stability with your ferro rod by grabbing onto your feather stick, and you can kind of hold it and strike it where you want to. So there you go. I hope it shed a little bit of light on how I use my ferro rod and some of the techniques that I use to get my fires going. And you know, you don't have to be using fat wood. There's lots of different things. Fat was just an easy way to demonstrate how I strike my ferro rod. So I really hope you like this video. This is Dave from BC Bushcraft. I'll see you in the next one.